Life in Code. Life in Code, Episode 2, Career Advice.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll give a brief introduction. My name is India Hosky, and I'm a junior computer information systems major, cybersecurity concentration, and computer science minor from Virginia Beach. And this year, I'm serving on the media slash podcast team for the Coding Suite Club. And today, we're just gonna get some, maybe a little bit of background knowledge, but just to know if you had any just a list of questions to see if you had any advice for students who are interested in pursuing careers in cybersecurity or software development based on attendance for our events. So thank you so much for being with us today. Did you want to start off with giving a brief introduction of yourself?
My name's Robert Burke. I am a instructor and I also assist in running the Cybersecurity Analytics Center at Howard University, which is wonderful because I know many great students like you, India, and many others. So it's a lot of fun. My background is I graduated from Providence College with a degree in government, political science, and I got hired by IBM as a programmer, a developer, and in their marketing division, so systems engineering and programming. So literally 2 weeks off the campus, I was in programming class for the first time, and I stayed with IBM for a couple of decades. Wonderful, great company, great experience. My career was in systems engineering, software development, but primarily as a project manager and a program manager, and then also in infrastructure. We did data center outsourcing, we did cloud setups, we did all things data center, and we did that with commercial clients and internal clients. Came to Howard 5 years ago and have been working with the Cybersecurity Analytics Center and teaching classes. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. So, I this isn't a question that I had on my list, but just based on what you just said, how was kind of the transition like working like full time as like a experience with IBM as like a software developer versus working at Howard? Like how was that transition for you kind of?
Very different environments in the commercial space, and I loved it, by the way. But it's a well-oiled machine, I'll put it that way. And we move fast. A lot of teamwork. You depend on your team. You're constantly learning. Very talented people, committed people. Howard is wonderful in a different way, but the mission is different. We're about helping the students, so we're not. um Whereas at IBM, we had to either make sure our customers, their systems were up and running, they had the adequate performance, they got the function, quality, performance they needed out of our solutions. At Howard, it's about the students, so it's more personal, more interaction. We're not as driven on deadlines. um, it's different, more relationship driven. But I'll pause there. I'm going to make one quick comment, but they're very similar too. You know, it is also similar. Um, it really is about relationships. It's all personal, even if you're working at a corporate or in any respect. Ultimately, it comes down to personal relationships. Here, it's with students and other faculty. So that would be the one thing I will even suggest, that we always make sure we are developing and maintaining good personal relationships.
Thank you for that response. And then what my first question is what first got you interested in like kind of like the technology space? So like whether that's software development or how you are more focused on cybersecurity at Howard, what kind of got you interested in that? Is it something that you studied in college? Like did you maybe study cybersecurity or is that something that you developed interest in after graduating?
Mostly after graduating. However, I'll say as a young person, I always liked math, how things work, figuring things out. I've always enjoyed puzzles, inquisitive. I love figuring how things out work and getting an explanation. So I enjoy that even if I'm not being paid. I just enjoy that as even a hobby. But what was neat is after I joined IBM, as a new hire, they trained me and they had great opportunities and wonderful people. And you can come in as a political science major. And if you wanted to be a developer, if you wanted to be maybe not an engineer, but certain fields you could move into, you had opportunities to learn and move into certain fields.
Thank you. And then how do you think that students can figure out which area of technology or cybersecurity that they want to specialize in? I know that I've talked about having an interest in like specifically like the cloud computing side, but how do you think that students can kind of see what to exactly specialize in?
Okay, great question, India. Great question. Now, I'm going to offer a perspective. Everybody has an opinion, everybody,
Hmm.
and you'll get flooded with opinions. I'm just going to give you my perspective. I would say try different things. Try different things, even things that might appear to be hard. You'll try it. You might like it. You may not like it for whatever reason. But at the same time, you got to be pragmatic. You want to be looking at, okay, what skill areas or capabilities or job functions do we get paid for? Where's their demand? And if you can marry those together, what you like to do with where there are opportunities and they'll pay a decent wage, that's maybe the secret sauce, finding where those two connect. Okay, so try different things. Um, um, and it's good to know there may be things you just don't like to do. Right? But try different things. And then also maybe you'll start to see why is it you like something. Now it might be, oh, I like that because I work with people, right? And then that becomes the common denominator as you go forward with your career or your academic, that you like things that involve people or you like things that involve science, whatever it is, find out what the it is. Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then this question is kind of similar to the first question I asked you, but what do you think are the key differences between working in the industry or working in the government or academia when it comes to tech and cybersecurity? So like I did kind of ask you earlier, what was your
Right.
like how was your transition from industry to academia go? But what do you think are like the main differences between the two?
Yeah. Well, industry moves fast. Yeah, moves fast. And I'll also say a lot of what you do in industry is lightweight. Lightweight in that you don't have to write, voluminous documentation. And whereas the government, I think they lean a little more into, full documentation and maybe what I'll call heavier solutions, which take longer. Right? Um, um, Also, industry has moved, at least in the last 30 years, towards a more agile development world, technology world. Well, try something. If it doesn't work, prototype it. Then let's pivot and try something else. Try something else. And I think that's at the core of innovation. Companies like Airbnb or Uber, somebody thought of this and said, let's try it, and they tried it, and over time it grew into multi-billion dollar businesses. So innovation on the commercial side, you'll see much more innovation, fast moving, but that also has another side. Companies can go out of business fast on the commercial side. Okay, so I would say speed, um, and innovation. You might see more of that on the commercial side.
Okay, thank you. And then these next couple of questions are going to be more targeted towards like programming specific questions. So
Right.
my first question is, what programming language do you think that it would be that are you think that are best for beginners to start with and why? Like what would be your
Okay.
recommendation?
Right. So the answer there, in my opinion, again, I'm giving my perspective. It depends on what ultimately you want to do. If you're going to become a software engineer, that's what you want to do. Um, I would lean to people who are experts at that, and they may say lean into C or something that's really deep and hard, and you're going to get down to the nuts and bolts of how programming works. And now, if you're going to be a business person and programming is just going to be one of the things in your tool bag, I would say go Python all day long. Python today. Um, it doesn't need to be written as efficiently, but it's easier to learn and to adapt. Um, so, for most of us, at least in the School of Business, I would say Python would be the one I would recommend.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, I actually do think that I want to be a software engineer. That's what I'm
Mhm.
going to be doing this summer actually. So I was that actually kind of like relates to exactly like what I want to do. So I was going to ask specifically with the School of Business, I feel like we mostly focus on Java. So do you think that in the future that they'll be able to like integrate like a Python course? I know that you talked about that before, but is that something that you hope that we
Yeah.
see in the future with CIS? Okay.
Right. You and I've talked about that. I really, and many students talk about it openly, that we
Mhm.
would like to have an elective in the School of Business for Python. Now, it might lean a little more into Python with data science and artificial intelligence and machine learning and things like that that we're also interested in. But absolutely. Um, and you can do your data analytics. I know in data analytics now, I think they do R Studio. Yeah,
Yeah, in data analytics we use R pretty much. That course was pretty tough, but yeah,
yeah,
we only used R. I know in my information assurance course we do use a little bit of Python, but it's like a really like small segment of Python. Like the class
correct.
isn't necessarily tailored to it since it's assurance. But I think that is something like, and like you mentioned, I have talked to like other students like in CIS, and they also have expressed like wanting to possibly pick up like a computer science minor because I know they offer like Python classes there. I've
Yep,
taken Python classes there. So
yep.
yeah, hopefully, I think that would be really good for CIS to kind of have that as an option like in the next coming years. I know that's probably not something that can happen next year, but like hopefully in the future.
Right. And you know what, India? I would say we would like you, students like yourself, to get this kind of training early and often. Get a little bit of that in your
Hmm.
freshman year, maybe a little more in your sophomore year,
Yeah.
and then maybe take a more in-depth class. But that, be it a different language or more in-depth in Python or whatever you select. So early and often, as early as possible.
Yeah, I was gonna I actually like that you said that because I feel like a lot of CIS students feel that way. I feel like our first like introduction to like technology and like the CIS
Yeah,
is intro to software design, which most of us don't normally take to like our sophomore year, maybe not even like until spring semester sophomore year. And I feel
right.
like if we were taking like those technical classes earlier on, like a computer science student starts out immediately taking intro to computer science like first semester freshman
Yep.
year. So I feel like the difference with CIS is I feel like we start off with taking like, our business orientation, all of our gen eds, but we don't really like start getting into technical concepts until like our sophomore year. So I feel like that would
Yeah.
definitely help if we did like get the like curriculum more technical earlier, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. And then that allows us, once you become upperclassmen, we can give you more advanced
Mhm.
content. Because right now we got to kind of go, I'll say back, but do some remedial things to get
Mhm.
everybody on the same page before we can move forward. Mhm. Good, good point.
And then this is kind of extension to my first question, but how do you think that students can build like a strong foundation in technical concepts while they're still in school? And would you say like that would just be like participating in organizations like this, like coming to
Yeah.
like coding suite meetings or like just practicing on YouTube? Like how do you think that students can kind of like strengthen their technical skills outside of the classroom?
Great comment. I do believe you want to become part of a community or different
Mhm.
communities of people who are like-minded, have the interest. So the clubs I think are wonderful. Right. Now you go to a club, you may not go to a club and like learn a lot any one day, but you meet
Mhm.
somebody, you hear something, you get motivated, you make a contact, you never know. Um, the other thing I would recommend, again, everybody has a perspective. I think students, especially in technology, you can get overwhelmed. There are so many different options, so many different paths, so many different languages, so much content on YouTube. All that's wonderful, but it's distracting, it's
Mhm.
confusing. Uh, I recommend if we can get rid of some of the noise and say, okay, let's choose a stack of software that you're going to work with, right? Or an ecosystem. Okay, I'm going to work in the Google ecosystem and I'm going to learn these one, two, or three programming languages over time, and then stay with that. And then with that, maybe there are education courses. Like I'm going to do the Google classes, or I'm going to do the Microsoft classes. I'm going to do and you notice I'm kind of touching on some of the things that get into the cloud world. You got to
Hmm.
kind of pick. Now they're very similar, and there's a lot of transferable knowledge. But if you can simplify and say, okay, here's my path. I'm going to stay over here. And employers like that. I mean, you're trained on Microsoft, Azure, and get really good at a smaller stack of things before you move on to other things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I did want to add a comment when you mentioned like joining a community because I feel like it's a great networking opportunity as
Yeah.
well. I can actually like attest to the cybersecurity club being like, I think in my opinion, a reason why I got my internship with Accenture Federal Services, because I know that they had a session where some Accenture folks came in and did
Yep.
like a lesson for the cybersecurity club, and I actually went up to the recruiter like right after it ended, like basically, hey, I need an internship, obviously in a more professional way, but do you guys have anything open? And then I ended up meeting him again at the career
Okay.
fair that was like 2 weeks after the club meeting, and then he recognized me and was like, oh, it's nice to meet you again, we actually do have something open. So I feel like that was kind of a way that I was able to get an opportunity, and I feel like a lot of students don't look at like clubs as like a way to network. I feel like they maybe think of it as like, oh, like this is obviously like a way for me to learn more about cybersecurity, but I think it can also help you in terms of like in just securing a job or securing opportunities, whether it be like a conference or just anything like that. And I
Yeah.
think that's really just
Well said.
like important for students to know.
Right. I absolutely agree. And good things happen when you show up. Good
Hmm.
things, and people notice. We notice who shows up. Right. It's funny you mentioned the recruiter. I think that's Mark. I forgot his last name. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Mark. Okay,
A
I went
great.
right up to him and I was a little scared because I was like, this is so random, but I went right up to him because they had actually talked like at the end of the session about like, and it's really important that you guys start looking for internships and stuff. And I was like, this is my chance. So I went
You
right up
went
to
for it.
him
Okay.
right
All
after
right.
they talked about internships. And then I think the conversation went well. So, and I ended up interning there. So it was really like, just, I think it's like being in the right place at the right time. Like, I happened to show up that day. I didn't realize that Accenture was even coming that day to like do a lesson with us, but I ended up showing up that day. They were there, and I just took advantage of the opportunity.
Right. Right. Agreed. Agreed. Good things happen when you show up.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mhm.
And then my next question, I think you might have touched on this already, but the next question is, are there any common misconceptions that you see students make when trying to learn how to code? I think you mentioned like maybe there's so much information online, so it might
Right.
be like
Right.
distracting sometimes, but do you think there's other
Right.
things that you think would be helpful for students to know?
Right. I was looking just prior to this call. There is a curve. I think students underestimate the work involved, right? So
Hmm.
initially, and we all have an inflated opinion of our skills and ability. Then you'll get into a new technology or programming language or something like, and all of a sudden it gets kind of hard.
Hmm.
So it gets hard before it gets easy. And so I think many of us underestimate what's involved. But if you can navigate that curve, okay, it's hard, but it's going to get better. Then you start to build on what you're learning and it becomes easier and you progress. So I think we underestimate what it takes. Because we underestimate, once we realize it's hard, we might get discouraged. We don't stay with it. So and then people kind of quit or drop out or stop taking the class, whatever. So that would be the one thing. Don't underestimate the work involved, but it's good for you. Mhm.
Thank you for that response. And then my next question is beyond like coding and programming, do you think, well, I think that they are, but I was gonna say, do you think that skills like problem solving and critical thinking are also just as important? And then what do you think that students can do to like improve on those skills that might not be necessarily technical, but skills that they would need to just be successful like in the workplace?
You know what? Great question. Yeah. Um, yes. The quick answer is yes. Problem solving is critical and critical thinking. Those are kind of these nebulous concepts. Well, what is that?
Hmm.
How do you learn to do
Yeah.
that? I, you just have to kind of work those muscles. Now, it's very interesting. Sometimes there's parallel, for example, doing puzzles, for example.
Hmm.
Um, looking at Jeopardy. Sometimes that will sharpen a skill, a muscle. You see something, you learn something, you hear something. So, great question, India. I don't know a great way other than you got to do it. You got to work on it. Um, yeah, problem solving, critical thinking. Then the other thing I would say is don't underestimate the importance of communication too.
Hmm,
Okay.
that's a good
Um,
one.
and that might be, and this is what was really great about IBM. If I didn't know how to do something, there would be a colleague. You would go out, you reach out to your colleague, you might be on a chat window with a colleague, and they help you, they give you what you need, they respond, they explain things. And again, it's not like there's a magic pill, but it's a lot of little interactions. Um, you listen to people. Listen. How did you do that? Ask questions. Um, be curious. There you go. I would just be very curious. Well, how did you do that? Right? And people love to tell you.
And you mentioned communication. Do you think that in terms of like the technology world, I feel like I've heard a lot in like professional conversations with like people that work like full time in like fields of like cybersecurity and software development that a lot of people in those fields um they can struggle to like break down technical concepts like people that are not working
Right.
like in the specific position. So do you think that's also an important skill to have to be able to like
Yeah.
break down technical concepts to like a person that's more like business oriented?
Right. Absolutely. And that might be the superpower here at the School of Business is to be
Mhm.
able to translate, use analogies, and verbally express what's hard to express sometimes. Um, it is critically important. And then also be really tuned into the person listening. As India does, and because there may be a different way I need to talk with you, I say talk or express myself versus somebody else. Okay.
Mhm.
Now there's a whole nother layer I'll mention. Also with communication, there's something called emotional intelligence. You got to
Mhm.
feel out how what's going on in the room. How are people reacting and receiving you? How are you presenting yourself? Um, and all that contributes to becoming really good teammates, team members and team players. um, you might be doing something that is insulting, irritating, maybe culturally biased, right?
Mhm.
Um, um, things like eye contact. Maybe somebody says, "Hey, you don't give me eye contact," where that individual may come from a culture that's considered rude.
Mhm.
One thing we did at IBM, and unfortunately all of tech did this, we outsourced work from the US to countries around the world, primarily India, and then later China and other Mexico, China, Brazil, all around the world. And that was a great experience, not great for US workers, but you work with people from all cultures around the world. And you started to learn, oh, and I don't want to stereotype, but there are some differences and they will express and gladly express, oh, I grew up in India and we don't do what you're talking about. Or um, and I'll share a short at IBM, our best employees, in my opinion, were Indian women.
Mhm.
And what I found, it was a communication thing. Indian men, there's a pride there. Oh, I can do it, no problem, I can do it, I'll get it done, I'll get it done. When in fact, I want you to tell me honestly where you are. Whereas an
Mhm.
Indian woman might say, I have doubts. I'm a little puzzled by what you're asking me to do. What is it you want me to? So we got to a better level of communication and understanding that ultimately made our projects more successful. Um, I think young Indian men who were ambitious and oh, I want to prove myself, but sometimes that can be foolish.
Mhm.
Anyway, I'll pause with that. I'll pause with that. But communication, yeah, yeah. And emotional intelligence, I'll tell the audience, tune into emotional intelligence because sometimes we're presenting ourselves in a way we're not aware of. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you for that point. And then my next question is, what kind of certifications do you think are valuable for students to kind of look at? I know that a lot of people, especially for cybersecurity, talk about like the Security Plus certification or like just CompTIA certifications in general. But and also, this is kind of like a two-part question. Do you think that students should focus on getting those like industry certifications, or should they focus on gaining like hands-on experience, like participating in
Right.
labs and like hackathons or
Yeah.
internships?
Well, let me do the latter question first.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in what do you know how to do? So
Mm-hmm.
experience, and tell you most hiring managers are looking for the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, the human resource people, the first round of sorting through the resumes, ranking the resumes, your certifications may move you to the top of the pile, help move you up.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, when you get to the interviewing manager, they don't really care. They don't care what class you took. They don't care what certification. What do you know how to do? And can you convey that in the interview? um, Now, in cyber, especially in this region, because you might work with a federal or a federal contractor like Accenture and others,
Mm-hmm.
um, that might be written into the contract that that contract Accenture is going to bring people in that are certified. So once you get
Mm-hmm.
on that contract, if you don't have a certification, you've got to go get it, right? You got to go get it. It's just part of the job. So I do recommend, even though I'm not saying it's the end all, that especially for younger people, just knock them out when you get a chance. Just knock them out. Um, but I would say if you had to make a choice, learn how to do things, get hands on, do it before you work on put time and energy into getting certified in the subject area.
And then when it comes to certifications, would you say that CompTIA is a good resource for like cybersecurity and like broader
Yeah,
topics, or would you say that you should go to like something more specific? Like if I was interested in cloud, sorry to bring up cloud again, but if I was interested in
I
cloud,
love cloud.
would you
Yeah,
recommend I go through like Google or like AWS or Azure
yeah,
to get that? Like what was your recommendation for kind of like
right.
specified
If
topics?
if you're in the cybersecurity lane, I would just encourage, if especially if you come through the classes, just go do the
Mm-hmm.
Security Plus TIA. Now, I will say it's a bit of a racket. It is. It's a good
Mm-hmm.
exam, um, but you could literally study for that, but yet not know how to do
Not
it
know the
anyway.
concepts. Yeah.
Right? You can cram for the exam,
Mm-hmm.
but not thoroughly know the concepts. Well done, India. Um, I would say just knock that out. So if you get to a job, it might get you on a project. Oh, India already
Mm-hmm.
has her Security Plus. Let me put her on. The other one, I'm a big believer in getting a cloud cert, especially you're in the if you're in the cyberspace. Go ahead and get one of the cloud certs, or maybe multiple. Now you got to make a decision. You got Azure, you got Google, you got AWS, and others, and they're all good. That's a tough one. uh, Again, I can give a perspective. I would say if you had to just pick one, I would go AWS. Now, having said that, I'm a big fan of the Google Cloud after saying that, right? But you can learn on one and switch to another. The fundamentals are all the same, just they call it different things in the different clouds. Mhm. So I would get a cloud cert. AWS has one called the AWS Practitioner. That's kind of for a newbie coming in. Our students, you guys could knock that out. You could study and knock that out. Um, but then after that, the other certifications may require you have some experience that you have to say, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
have 1 or 2 years of doing this work or related work. Mhm. Was that helpful? I'm sorry. Was that confusing?
Yeah, I think it was. I think for at least the certifications, I think I think I've just heard more about the AWS one, so I think that was
Yeah.
helpful. I know that when I took the cloud computing course for my computer science minor through CEA, it was kind of like a guinea pig course, I think, because they hadn't, I think it's like the first couple years they've done it. So we did AWS, but I don't know like if how prepared I am in terms of a certification. I'll definitely have to go back and study.
Right.
But I know that we also just did for your networking class, we just did a few labs with the Google Cloud, but I actually liked
Yeah.
because I didn't use Google Cloud in the other class. It was all AWS. So
Yeah.
I think that kind of made me think, oh, maybe I should go the Google route. But I think just overall, I think I've heard more about the AWS, and I know that
Yeah.
was your recommendation. So I probably will
Yeah.
start with the AWS if
Right.
I do
Pound
get
for
the
pound,
certification.
that certification may pop up on more job
Mm-hmm.
searches and things like that. Yeah. Can't go wrong with AWS. The only concern I have with AWS is to get on it, you have to put your credit card down. So
Mm-hmm.
be careful that you turn your VMs off and you turn things off. You don't want to run your charges up. So just be careful.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, otherwise, it's very cheap or inexpensive or even no cost, but keep an eye on the cost.
Okay, and then another question I had was how important do you think ethical decision making is when it comes to technology and cybersecurity? And then how do you think, obviously, students are probably not, unless we have internships and things like that, but we probably aren't working like on like with like an actual client site yet, possibly. But how do you think students can kind of like start developing that mindset when it comes to like ethical decision making?
That's a great question. That is, because it doesn't get talked about enough, does it? Right.
Mm-hmm. It
It's
doesn't.
and I'll say as a general statement, it is critical. You don't want to ever make a non-ethical, unethical decision, um,
Mm-hmm.
even if nobody knows you're doing it. You know what I mean? But definitely, if you get caught, it could be all, because in technology, especially in cyber, there are going to be audits, there are going to be investigations. We're going to do forensics. And if they found, and let's take, for example, you went in and um, you deleted passwords on a system such that people could get in without passwords because it's easier. It's not that you were doing something devious or mischievous, but it was a violation of the policies or procedures. You don't want to do that. Uh, Now, ethics, and this is a great question. In the long run, being ethical probably is more work, right? And it's not that you're stealing money. Maybe it's just a little easier to do it, take the shortcut, right? Don't file the paperwork. Um, but in the long run, you're better off just doing it right the first time, doing it proper. Mhm. That's a great question. Wow. Now let's stay there. Let's stay there for a second. And this is because I would say the other thing, as anybody is developing their career, their journey, also think very strongly about your values. What are your values? Because they may very well be the light that you want to follow. So, for example, if you value um, doing something that's socially positive, environmentally friendly, um, whatever that is, whatever your values are, you may want to go to a job that pays the highest money, that has you do things that are on the edge of ethics. um, it may dictate the kind of work environment or culture you move into. And I always say, don't always go for the biggest payday. Look at the culture and look at the people you're going to work with. Because there are industries or positions where they'll take you in and they'll spit you out. Just as quick as they take you in, they'll spit you out. So look at culture, look at people you're going to work with. But again, that's my values. That may not be, other people may say, no, I want to get those dollars, right? Anyway, so that would be my other advice is, really understand your values and make sure you follow your values as you pursue your journey.
Okay, thank you for that response. And then I don't know how much time you have. I know this was blocked until 4, but I know
Yep.
you probably can't stay until 4. But I did have a couple more questions if that's okay.
Keep going. Yep.
All right. So, how do you see the role of AI impacting like careers when it comes to like software development and like cybersecurity? Because I know there's like a lot of panic around that, like, oh, AI and ChatGPT is going to take our jobs. Like, how do you kind of feel when it comes to that? And do you think that students should kind of like leverage AI to kind of like help them advance in their careers, or like, what is your kind of like opinion on that?
Right. Another great question. Ultimately, I think many of us who think we know don't know. You know what I mean? We don't
Hmm.
really know. However, we know this is almost like electricity. Before we had
Mm-hmm.
electricity, you couldn't even imagine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was watching a program recently, was it 60 Minutes? And they were talking about something called artificial generative intelligence. And that's where artificial intelligence is almost thinking like a human would think, right?
Mm.
That it has more context, sensitivity. I'm not going to call it intuition, the things that AI really can't do today.
Hmm.
But
That's
given
interesting.
enough data, given enough data, a machine can predict things. All right. So AI will change what we do. What they said, I think I've heard 70 million jobs are going to go away, but
Mm.
100 million are going to get created. Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, Now, you had a specific question as a developer. I'm all for using AI. Learn to use it. Okay. Understand what you're doing, because the answer many times, as you know, India, it's not the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good answer, but it's not the right answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, and a good friend of mine keeps saying, also, we want to be careful, at least as students, we want you to be a level deeper into it. AI is, there's so much hype, right? But to be able to break it down, okay, we're talking large language models, or we're talking maybe some of the mathematics that goes into, robotic intelligence or things like that. But to get students a level or two lower into what we're talking about when we say AI. Also, I heard somebody say, why don't we start calling it augmented intelligence,
Mm.
where you're the intelligent one and it's just a tool that's making you more productive. Um, right. That was a broad question. Um, I
It
would say
was.
bottom line is many of us don't, we kind of know, but we don't really know. But we better figure out if 70 million jobs are going away, we don't want to be preparing for one of those jobs if we have a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if 100 million are going to get created, where are those opportunities and what's the skills that we need? There's a, for example, they were talking about bringing manufacturing back to the United States with this tariff war. They make all kind of things in China that we sell in Walmart
Mm-hmm.
and the dollar store and things like that, because they pay people, 20 cents on the dollar compared to the United States. But if it ever came back here, it would be highly automated. That we have a problem in the United States that many of our workforce aren't ready to work in that space. It's not like making a T-shirt, but you're working with robots and technology and data at a whole different level. So anyway, it's fascinating. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know on the or later. um, but I would
I
say, as a
think.
student, I'm all for you guys using it. Yeah.
Mhm. I think that in terms of like, so the second part of the question, in terms of like using AI as a student, I think can definitely be damaging if people abuse it. So like how you said, AI is okay to use, but when you know what you're doing. But I feel like a lot of students like
Oh
can
yeah.
just get lazy with it and
Yep.
just let AI do everything for them, especially in like technical classes. Just like let them do the whole assignment for them. And I think it can become dangerous in that aspect because AI is like so
Be off.
easily accessible.
Yep.
People would just tend to use that and not really use it for like helping them. So like
Yeah.
if so like when it comes to like non-tech stuff, so like if a student was writing a paper, I think an appropriate way to use AI would be like, hey, could you give me like either a prompt to talk about for my paper, or could you give me an outline of what my paper could look like? I think a way to abuse it would just be, can you write the paper for me? So I
Yep.
think in terms of like academics, I think students can get lazy in terms of like using AI to
Yep.
just not not learn at all. So I think that's when it can become dangerous.
Yep. I prefer, as a teacher, we know when a student's, and I say no. Um, um, I prefer, for example, if we put a complex question, sometimes I actually prefer one sentence back from the student, because that's where you are. If you give me 5 paragraphs, and it's written like it was in the New York Times magazine, professionally written. Right. But we got to navigate through this. We got to. I use it all day long, and I say use it because if you're in Google and you're doing Google searches, Gemini's kicking in constantly.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And it's funny, you and I are going sideways. When we did the National Cyber League, I did those a lot of challenges, and I ran a lot of challenges through AI to see what would come back, and that's permitted, right? And I could see, many times, like if you give me a bunch of code, just drop it in AI. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
what language, what's this code doing?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's unbelievable in the development space. And we heard a statistic in GitHub. I think they said more than half of the code going into GitHub, developers uploading code, is coming from AI.
Mm.
There I go, AI. Because even developers who know how to write the code, they say, hey, it's just easy, let it write the code. And then maybe I'll tweak it, I'll eyeball it, or I'll pick it up in testing what needs to be modified. Great question. Good question. Good. Mhm. But
And
you hit
then,
it on the head. Don't get lazy with it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Don't. Mhm.
I think that's the most important thing, especially like in the field of like software development. I feel like if you don't know how to do anything, that could be problematic if you're just like relying on AI to kind of like take you through like especially when it comes to like assignments, like just taking you through everything. I feel like that can be problematic if you're not able to like actually apply the concepts to real life. So,
It's interesting in cybersecurity. Uh, there's concerns that AI, machine learning, things like that, that the adversaries will have the advantage initially, that they can do more thorough fakes and counterfeiting data and things like that. But then the defenders eventually will get the advantage as more and more data comes in. Our models will pick up, okay, these are the attack tactics, and the artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence will help us determine anomalies quicker and faster. So they say initially maybe the adversary gets the advantage, but as the models get trained, continue to be trained, we believe the defenders will have the advantage on detecting uh, attacks and anomalies.
okay, and then I'm gonna ask like kind of like a two-part question
Yep.
in one for my last question. So, what is like this is kind of like switching gears a little bit from our topic with AI, but going back to like you being a professor, what is kind of like a memorable like what's like one of a like a memorable moment with you? Would it be like being able to help a student out or like a specific project that you've like worked on? And then what do you think is kind of like the most rewarding aspect of teaching like technical concepts to students? Like being one of the professors like in CIS for cybersecurity specifically, what do you think is like rewarding about that for you?
hmm Um, Another great question. I'll tell you what really gets me excited and it makes me very happy is when students, it's in your feedback, student feedback, and it doesn't always have to be positive, but you guys really are, first, you're so bright and you really know, and you'll give feedback maybe on an assignment or something that helps us make it better. That's
Mm-hmm.
so, so I get really great ideas, improvement suggestions, or feedback. Um, Sometimes, like this year, I keep raising the bar on you guys, and I get some complaints. I'll get you some. You guys aren't complaining. You're saying you're acknowledging that was hard. You acknowledge when it's
Mm-hmm.
hard. But I'm amazed, and you included, like this year when we did National Cyber League, you guys weren't supposed to get to 1,500. And I want to say 10 to 12 of you got to 1,500. I was amazed. I didn't know how you did that. So I- that that's the most rewarding part. Was that the full question? Did I answer it all? Or?
I said I think, yeah, it was kind of like a two-part question. The other part of it was what's like I guess like a favorite memory you have as a professor, or like something that you really like just remember being a good experience for you. But that could kind of, you could kind of answer that in terms of where you said
Yeah,
feedback is
yeah,
rewarding for you. I think that could be the same answer for that
right.
also.
Same answer is when you guys talk, when you guys talk, and even informally, and because we can, based on that, we can make things better. We can do things, and or uh, the other thing I will say is across the board we have very smart students. So one of our challenges as instructors is not to screw you guys up, right? You India, you guys are going to be successful whatever you do. That's so let's not be in your way. Yeah, just yep. That's it. I'll stop there. You guys are a pleasure. You're smart, hardworking too. You guys work hard. Mhm. All right.
Okay, thank you. I think that was my last question that I have.
Awesome.
I know I asked you like a lot of very loaded questions, but I think you gave really good answers. For my last thing, I would just ask like, is there any other additional like wisdom or like tips you have for anyone that might be listening to the podcast that's a part of the Coding Suite Club?
Okay. Um, I think you hit it earlier. Show up. Just show
Mm-hmm.
up. And as an instructor, I really appreciate students that just come up to say hello or introduce yourself. Um, there are so many wonderful, outstanding students, but if you come introduce, we take a mark, a record, a picture in our mind. Um, yeah, just show up. You never know. Be, um, that's it. I would just say show up and let it be known what you want. Let it be known. All right, you're good at that, India, by the way. So ask questions and ask questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. On
Okay.
behalf of the Coding Suite Club, I want to say thank you so much for participating in this podcast. And I think that you had really great insights that would be, just very beneficial to students that would like to tune into the podcast. So thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you, India. Always good to talk to you.
Life in Code.